Our second speaker, Dr. Zeki Saritoprak, is the Bediüzzaman Said Nursi Chair in Islamic Studies at John Carroll University in Cleveland, and a prolific author, including just some of the titles: Islam in Contemporary Turkey, The Contributions of Fethullah Gülen, Fundamentals of Rumi's Thought, Islam's Jesus, and many others, including one I just learned that is in the works right now on Islamic eschatology, which I look forward to very much. Today he's speaking about the Hizmet movement and political Islam, clash or cooperation.
Good afternoon. It's afternoon, I think, right? Almost. It is afternoon. And assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. So my topic is the Hizmet movement and political Islam, clash or cooperation. So I have 11 points that I like to elaborate on with this regard. And my main approach is basically from an Islamic theological perspective. I am a theologian by training. I didn't introduce myself. I am a professor of Islamic studies at John Carroll University. So all what I will be saying is from that perspective. I'm not a political scientist, so please don't consider my explanations from a political scientist perspective. So what is political Islam? Political Islam, Islamism, political Islamism. These are several terms that when I try to explain, I had a hard time to explain from an Islamic perspective, because from an Islamic theological perspective, Islam is one. There are no two Islams. There is only one Islam. So as a term, I found it problematic as a term, but I couldn't find a better term. So I use this with that sense that how it is used and how it is understood, basically. The use that I will be, the use that I am comfortable with is, if we are going to say a politic and Islam, a politics that is compatible with Islamic teaching, that will be Islamic. But when we say political Islam, we indicate that there are two Islams, political and another Islam, and that becomes problematic from theological perspective. So that is one point I wanted to make. The second point, though in Islam there is a distinction historically between theological discourse and political or legal discourse. There are sources of Islam that focuses on legal dimension. There are sources of Islam that are focusing on leadership. So this is more about leadership, which is also known as imamah. And initially it was not a problem in the Islamic world, initially, in the Islamic theology. But because in the Shiite tradition of Islam, leadership has to be a religious person. The leader of the state has to be a religious person, has to be actually even from the family of the Prophet. And that is why it became an issue for the Sunni Islamic tradition. And Sunni Muslims have started to focus on this in the manuals of Islamic theology. And generally it is the last part of the manuals of Islamic theology. So it is a part of Islamic theology. It has become a part of Islamic theology, because also there is a saying of the Prophet that, I don't know if I put the hadith here. It says, the leaders has to be from the Quraysh. From the Quraysh means like from the family of the Prophet. And then a longer version of this hadith, generally Sunni Muslims, I would say Sunni Muslims, have said that it is not necessary to be from the family of the Prophet. But Shiite Islam said it is necessary because they are the offspring of the Prophet. They are pure by nature, and therefore they should be from the family of the Prophet. Imams, It's called 12 imams. The longer version of the hadith is that the leaders are from the Quraysh. When they judge justly. When they promise, they keep their promise. When they are asked for mercy, they show mercy. Any of them who do not fulfill this, let the curse of God and angels and all people be on them. So this is the hadith that is describing the qualities of a leader. What are these qualities? Mercy, to have mercy when people are asking for mercy, to keep the promise when they give the promise, and to be just when they judge. If a leader, the Sunni tradition of Islam says, if a leader is sticking to these principles, that leader is a just leader, is a valid leader. The leadership is a valid. So Islamic theology has elaborated on these qualities of leaders. I don't know if we find some leaders with these qualities in modern day. You will decide about that. So another point that I like to make, the fourth point that I like to make. So coming to the Hizmet philosophy, yes. The origin of the Hizmet movement are more direct and related to the philosophy of Fethullah Gülen, affectionately known as Hoca Efendi. In the Turkish culture, Hoca Efendi literally means, Hoca means master, Efendi means like the pious person, the valued person. So like a valued master, a good master. That is the title of Mr. Gülen in the Turkish tradition. And his understanding of the teachings of the Quran and the Hadith, and especially in the teachings of the pre-modern era Islamic scholars, and especially Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, who is a contemporary Islamic scholar. And we see that Mr. Gülen has faced difficulties in his early life and even today. I had a chance to meet with him long time ago. He was, I think maybe it was 1980s. He was under surveillance, and today he is still in the same position. So political Islam, in a certain extent, and maybe at that time it was not political, there was something more. Well, it was military coup of 1980s. Still, he was facing these difficulties, and still he is today facing these difficulties. So his approach, generally, I would say, is to be in equal distance from all political parties. That is his major approach. And I think my colleague previously mentioned that Hizmet wants to be much more open to all segments of political spectrum, not only to one party. So during this period, the period of 1980s, Gülen was unable to preach publicly, but he gathered with his admirers in people's houses. I was once told by one of Mr. Gülen's early supporters, a medical doctor, then during this period, he would say, there was a school and we rented a house. He told me that we rented a house next to that school so that when people would gather, it would not be visible by the military power at that time, so that they will be able to meet with Mr. Gülen. He was under the, there was an arrest warranted for him in 1980s. Gülen, Mr. Gülen drew such crowds like this due to his strong emotional nature of sermons. Dale Eichelman called Mr. Gulen the Billy Graham of Turkey. He was really attracting people from almost 500 miles coming to for his people were coming for his sermons. Later, Mr. Gulen would become close to Turgut Özal after he came to power after the coup. Mr. Özal came to power after the coup. It was this closeness to Özal that kept Mr. Gulen from going to prison. And it was Özal that formally prevented Mr. Gulen from being arrested, basically. So point number 6 that I like to make is about relation between Mr. Gulen and AKP in today's world. You might be wondering why these things are happening, what happened in the beginning of this process. Gulen has stated that the movement, I mentioned this earlier, that stay equally distant from all political parties. In the time of postmodern military coup, generally it's called postmodern military coup, of February 28, 1997, the military put tremendous pressure on Hizmet and the members of the movement. Those who witnessed that era, they will remember how the people of Hizmet were under the pressure from the military. In fact, one of the leaders of the military said, if 10 million are killed, still there are 50 million left. There's so violent dimension that was going on at that time. Under such circumstances, Hizmet members in Turkey became understandably nervous. Members of the military would audit Hizmet institutions at this time. This led Mr. Gulen to say that Hizmet has nothing to hide, and the military could have the schools and other institutions if they wanted them. He just wanted to give all of it to the military if you want it. It was into this environment that the AKP emerged. The current political party that is ruling Turkey emerged as an alternative to the military and hope for democracy. The AKP, which was founded by people who had been associated with Necmettin Erbakan, the founder of the political Islam in modern Turkey, and the earlier Islamic parties in Turkey. So Recep Tayyip Erdogan, just prior to the official founding of the AKP, came to the United States and met with Mr. Gulen and was clear in his rhetoric of the time that the AKP will support democracy in Turkey, will bring democracy to Turkey, and will rescue Turkey from the oppression of the military. So from my understanding, Gulen was honestly hoping that this would be the case, and Erdogan and the AKP would live up to this ideal. This says something about Mr. Gulen's personality in that he is very trusting of people. It is true that Mr. Gulen had no alternative. But as a new voice in Turkey arguing for freedom of expression and disowning their former Islamic party roots, it is reasonable to assume that Mr. Gulen would have honestly believed in Erdogan's words. Despite coming from opposite ends of the spectrum, mysticism and politics, Gulen from a mystical Islam, if we can use this term, and Erdogan from a political Islam, they were both targets of the military at this time. As such, had reason and desire to work together for the greater good. That was the goal. We can work together for the greater good. Was this approach of Gulen theologically justifiable from an Islamic theological perspective? Was it justifiable? Or one can ask, does politics have some theological roots in Islam? So there is no doubt that power is necessary for the establishment of justice and seeking justice through peaceful means without causing any injustice has been an ideal principle in the Islamic discourse and tradition. So justice is the essential of the Islamic principles. Without justice, there cannot be true Islam, basically. Politics are not inherently prohibited in Islam. That is very, very clear principle in Islam. Politics are okay as long as they serve justice. It is acceptable as long as it serves the community and works for the betterment of society. Such a politics requires strong, knowledgeable, truthful, righteous, merciful, pious, and skillful individuals. Mere religiosity is not enough for leadership. This is a very important Sunni principle in Islam. Mere religiosity is not enough for leadership in a society. In Islam, such leadership should be found in someone who will sacrifice their own personal interests for the interests of their community. Such political involvement is even praiseworthy. So politics are not inherently bad. It is praiseworthy even. However, politics that is based on self-interest can polarize society and is so dangerous to the well-being of the society as a whole that the famous Muslim scholar Bediüzzaman Said Nursi says, it is a savage animal. Such politics is a savage animal. So the early successes of the Prophet, including the 4 rightly guided caliphs, are considered examples of this piety. I have 3 minutes left.
2.5.
2.5. So politics and piety can rarely be found together. The Prophet of Islam, showing such a concern for justice and leadership, says that the caliphate in my community is 30 years. After that, it will be kingdom. That's very famous hadith of the Prophet. Only 40 years remain just society in politics. The narrators of the hadith records that there were discussions about the leaders of the Umayyad dynasty. They were claiming that they were caliphs, but the narrators were saying that actually they were not. They were not following the path of justice, and they were worst of the kings. There are some very sad stories in the Islamic history, like one of these leaders called Hajjaj killed maybe thousands of members of the family of the Prophet, was known as Hajjaj Zalim, the wrongdoer Hajjaj. And he was a leader. He was a governor of the Umayyad dynasty. So to come to the conclusion, I would say, despite the initial hope that a moderate Islamic government could lead to the betterment of society, generally the ideas espoused by political Islam have tended to become totalitarian in nature. In many cases, this extreme obsession with power ignore the fundamental principles of Islam that basically consist of public welfare, compassion, justice, and wisdom. There is no public welfare in killing of individuals or confiscating people's property. This is not allowable even in a war against rebels in the Islamic theology. There is a war, if there is a war against rebels, the government cannot confiscate the properties of the rebels. It's a principle in Islam, but today, unfortunately, it is practiced. People's properties are confiscated. And finally, there is a statement for Mr. Gulen, and I think that is the important point. In earlier I had an interview with him on behalf of the Muslim World Journal, and when we asked him about reconciling Islam and politics, he suggested that Islam is not against democracy. Islam is not against politics that's based on justice. And he said that, I believe that Islam also would enrich democracy in answering the deep needs of human beings, such as spiritual satisfaction, which cannot be fulfilled except through the remembrance of Eternal One. So he wants to make democracy more spiritual, to bring a new dimension to democracy, if it is possible to bring spiritual need of human beings as a part of democratic process. Thank you very much.